Sorry, so yeah. How can I get you sound? Sorry, so yeah. Oh, it looks like there's sound now. How can I get you sound? Sorry, so yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. It looks like there is sound. I'm sorry about that. Maybe just make sure to test this. Don't want to jinx anything with this. Okay. And it looks like the video quality, let me make sure this video is working. I don't want to jinx this. Okay, I'm just going to leave leave this the way it is. So yes, the universe works. Okay, thank you for your patience. Yeah, making sure that it sounds down. Yeah, it's down. So, okay, I'm not going to touch anything. I don't want to jinx this. Okay, so thank you for your patience here. And you can still hear me, see me. I'm going to scan. Yeah, okay, great. So today, as I wanted to say, okay, and thank you everybody who is here. So Nur Sultan, Mila, Victor, Anastasia, Maria, Elena, Ina, and so on. So thank you for your comments so far, Diana and Valeria. So thank you everybody here for joining. Okay, so let me know in the comments if you have been at the other webinars that we've done for the speaking section and the writing section. Hi, Sandra, Sasha. Okay, so let me know if you have been at the other webinars that we did for the speaking and writing. That way I can have a little bit of a continuity, know who's here, know what materials you are familiar with. So, okay, so today we are focusing on the reading section. And this is can be one of the most challenging parts of the exam, because you have a lot of the pressure, the time pressure, for about 20 minutes to go through a short reading passage of about 700 words, and you have about 12 to 14 questions of different types. So these can be related to the vocabulary, they can be factual questions that you have to find some piece of information within the text. There can be paraphrasing. You have to restate some information that is from a sentence, and you have to put that into other words. You have to be careful with some of those questions because they might have the wrong idea. They might make the wrong conclusion. So you have to be very careful about the information in some of those questions. Today, we're not necessarily going to deal with the difficult questions, which could be like the summary question, where you have to pick 2 or 3 questions that summarize the entire text. We're going to deal with that one next week. There's also the question about inserting a sentence into a paragraph. We're not going to look at that one today. And one of them that can also be a little tricky is the kind of negative factual question, where all of this information was discussed in this paragraph, except for this one. We won't get so much into that one today, or the putting content into a table. That's a little less frequent, but we'll look at some of the easier ones today and just getting into your reading strategies and some of your reading techniques and how to stay focused and how to deal with the reading section. So first of all, you have basically kind of three passages that you're going to deal with in the reading section, and each one is going to take 20 minutes. And overall, your timer is going to be for all of these passages. So you'll have 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. If you have an extra section, an extra reading passage, meaning like you have 4 reading passages, you will have a total of, in that case, 80 minutes for that passage. The thing is, you won't know which one is extra because they will all look the same. But what's going on is that ETS is constantly updating the tests and updating the materials. So they will periodically they will give students an extra set of reading, or in the listening section, which we'll talk later on, there will be extra listening questions. So they will never give you extra speaking or extra writing. So whatever we have done so far with the 6 speaking questions and the 2 writing questions, those are standard. Those won't change. You won't suddenly have 7 speaking questions or 3 essays. But on the reading section and on the listening section, you can have extra material. So be aware that that can happen. They won't tell you, oh, reading passage number 2 is the fake one or is the experimental one. They won't tell you that. So you have to make your best effort on all of the reading passages. Now, another thing to consider when you go to the testing center is, when do you start? So what I mean by this is, if you are scheduled to start at 9 a.m. and you arrive at the testing center at, let's say, 8:30, when they tell you like be a half hour early, and you're there, you put all of your things away, and you have like signed the letter and the waiver, and you've gone to the bathroom, and you had something to drink, and you're ready, and they tell you, okay, let's register you, let's take your picture. You have an option there. You could go into the testing room where the computers are and get set up and get started. And let's say you could do that at 8:40, 20 minutes before the test actually starts. Now, what's going to happen is, if you do that, you're going to be the first one in the room, or maybe the first or second in the room. But everybody else who comes in, these like 20, 30 people after you, that could be a source of a distraction for you. So if you know yourself that you're probably not a good reader and you get distracted easily, you may want to be very careful about when you walk into the room with the computers, because what's going to happen is you're going to be distracted by these other people walking in the room. You're going to try to be focusing on this first test, this text, and you could easily get distracted on there. So your other option, let me finish that, sorry, is if you do that, if you are one of these first person in the room for that section there, sorry if I'm also looking at the message to make sure I can see this. If you are one of those first people in the room, what's going to happen is you're probably going to finish the reading section and the listening section before the majority of the people. And in that case, you'll probably have your 10-minute break before everybody else. And when you come back in the room after your break, you're going to be one of the first people doing a speaking section, and you won't have distractions. You won't hear people speaking at the same time as you. Those people will still be working on their listening section, or they will still be at their break. So you have that choice. You could go into the testing center early, about 20 minutes before your test actually starts. If the people at the testing center say, if you want to, you can get started. So you have that option, and then on the speaking section, you won't have those distractions. Or you figure, I'm not a good reader, I get easily distracted, I have problems with concentration and all that. Maybe it's a better suggestion that you start the test at the time the test starts. So like if it starts at 9 a.m., you go in there at 8:59 or 9, and all of these other people go in before you. They're already set up. You don't have to deal with people walking in after you because you might be the last one in there. However, I mean, that will allow you the concentration without these distractions during the reading section, but realize that after your break, you're going to have to deal with those 20, 30 people working on their speaking section before you start it. So you do have those two options. You could, if you need that extra concentration during the reading section, which I think I would have preferred to have done that instead of getting distracted by people walking in. However, on the speaking section, you would have to deal with people speaking around you as if you were in a restaurant or a cafe that was very busy and other people were talking while you're trying to have a conversation. So you do have those two choices. That's the first thing I just want to get out of the way, so you know in terms of your test strategy, actually going through the test, you do have those options about starting the test early or starting it on time and realizing what kind of distractions you could have. I also had some difficulty with the test itself in the reading section. About 2 floors above me, there was a drill. There was a drill that was being used for construction work, and I found it very annoying. It was very disturbing to have to deal with that distraction. Another student told me in the testing center the computer suddenly stopped and they had to start the test over again. So that also affected their kind of concentration and staying focused on the test. Another student told me that there was problems with like the air conditioning unit. So it was either very hot outside and that made it very uncomfortable inside the testing center. So you need to be ready for like the worst case scenario for the reading section and the rest of the test. But as the reading section, definitely you have to concentrate on a lot of this material. You have to be very used to the way the text appears on the screen. That is in a very kind of compact area on half the screen, and the questions are on the other side. So you need to get used to that. There isn't space in the text. It's very compact. So if you're used to reading books and newspaper articles and magazine articles on the internet or on print, you're not going to have that visual kind of space. So you have to have a focus in a very narrow area where the text is. It's also going to be full of a lot of content, of very dense content, very technical in some cases. I unfortunately had 2 texts that I hated and I did not enjoy. There was things about like anthropology and sociology and some like really ancient history about kind of ancient civilizations, and I could not connect with the text itself. I could not concentrate, unfortunately, and it made it very hard to connect with questions. So I would definitely recommend that you get used to reading very difficult academic texts that you don't enjoy. These texts are not meant for your reading pleasure like you would for a novel or an interesting story. This is a lot of factual information. There's a lot of information in there that it's compact. They're going to be putting questions and manipulative answers that are there to trick you. So you have to be very strategic. You have to be very careful with how you go through these questions, how you go through the reading passage. You have to get good at speed reading and being able to locate content in a very quick manner, and not get too distracted with like the fact that you're in this testing center, it's on a computer, you could have other people around you, you could have these noises from outside. So you have a lot of conditions that are not favorable, but you need to mentally prepare for that worst case scenario. In this reading section, it's the first thing that go through it one by one on there. Okay, so keep in mind your time management skills as well, because you have perhaps maximum 8 minutes to look at the text. I would probably not recommend reading it all the way through. I would recommend skimming the first sentence of each paragraph to get the general topic sentence. Usually what happens with these texts, the first line of a paragraph is going to let you know what the topic is. And I would take a look at those topic sentences in their order and see what is the general point that is being made in this passage. Make sure you also understand, like, remember what the title of the reading passage is, because that is also going to help you focus on what is it that we're talking about. So you can have a variety of subjects in here. They can be history, they can be science related, they can be things about ancient history, they can be things about agriculture. There's lots of variety of text that can be on there, and just be ready for this. Keep in mind, though, that in terms of the content that's in the text and the questions themselves, nothing is coming from your own personal knowledge. All of the information of these questions is in the text itself. So you don't have to do, you don't have to reflect on other things that you've read before or other information that you know from outside sources. That is not being tested in here. So all of the answers are located in text itself. And if you get distracted, if you get nervous, you may need to kind of use a little bit of note-taking strategies just to kind of breathe, close your eyes for a few seconds, come back to the question, refocus, regather yourself. It does happen. I'm not a good reader myself. I do recognize this. So it is a section that I don't particularly enjoy. I definitely enjoy the speaking section, the writing section, and the listening section a lot more than the reading section. But again, this is just practice, practice, practice as much as you can. Become familiar with these typical questions and the types that there are. So I gave you the link here. I will give it to you again. So we're going to be looking at these examples in the next half hour or so. So I'm sorry for the audio technical problem that we had at the beginning here. So here's this link again. We're going to be looking at the examples, PDFs that are there. So you can go there and open up the first PDF, which is, it says Volume 1, and you can click the A4 PDF, and we're going to look at this first reading passage that is there. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see this. And you guys are lucky, the first topic there, it's on page 4. I would recommend that you switch to that. And so I'm going to switch over and share my screen here. And please let me know that you can see my screen on here. Just 1 second. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, please let me know in the comments if you can see my screen. I would appreciate that confirmation. So this reading passage, yeah, if you could, yes, Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Anastasia. Okay. Thank you for confirming that you can see the screen. Okay. So in addition to seeing my screen, if you would prefer, you can also load this PDF on your browser and then just listen to me talking on here. So interestingly enough, you can, like, I am actually living in Mexico City. I have been living here for 8 years. So this is a text about the city Teotihuacan, which was the Aztec capital that was before the Spaniards arrived. So this is an interesting text to go through. So unfortunately, I would say in this text, for myself, I would probably get distracted by the fact that I live here. So I would have external information, and that could be a problem because I might know stuff that is being asked or not being asked, and I might use that information like against myself. So you have to be very careful if you are specialized in some area of research or a college subject, be very careful that you don't mix your external knowledge with what's being discussed in the reading passage. So stay focused on what information is in there and what information is not in terms of coming from your own background. Okay, so what I can see here from just going through this initially is, okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs. Okay, and we have a couple of words in gray that are highlighted. So I can imagine that in the first paragraph, the word massive, that's probably going to be a vocabulary question. And in the second paragraph, pinpoint and ingenuity, those are probably also going to be vocabulary questions. In paragraph 3, predominant, I'm probably going to also interpret that as probably a vocabulary related question. In paragraph 4, a competitive edge over its neighbors, they're probably going to ask me to interpret that in terms of like, well, like what would be a competitive edge, or like what is that referring to? So there's probably going to be some information in paragraph 4 that I'm going to have to find that relates to competitive edge. Okay, and then in paragraph 6, I have the thriving obsidian operation. Maybe I'm going to have to get another reference of what does that refer to specifically as they are there. Okay, the way this appears right now on my screen, unfortunately, is not going to be exactly the typical way that it would look on the text. This is actually like a page layout that I would have for reading an article in a paper or reading an article in a book. It's going to actually be half the page, and I will make sure that in the next video that we do for next week, when we go into more of these questions and more of the difficult ones, I will make sure to show you how it looks on the screen when you're taking the test, because you want to make sure that, I mean, because the ETS, this is actual authentic materials from ETS, but the day of the test, it doesn't look like this. So make sure you are working with materials that do give you the way it's going to look on the test, the exam. So the more you get used to that, the less you will kind of be uncomfortable on the day of the test. Okay, so going into the strategy here of just like reading the first sentence and getting an idea of what are we talking about. So the rise of Teotihuacan. So that's the title. So the rise. What is this rise? Okay, rise could be maybe rise in power. This could be how this area, how this city began to grow. So it could be grow in terms of size. Rise could be in terms of power. So that word rise, it could have some interpretation of what is this? It's not just a description of what the city looks like. It's also of how it became important in terms of maybe military-wise or economically-wise or religious relationship. So those would be a few things that I would want to make sure I understand, even just looking at the title of like, what could I anticipate in the text here? So now I'm going to be looking at the first sentence of each one of these paragraphs. Okay, so the city of Teotihuacan, which lay about 50 kilometers northeast of modern-day Mexico City, began its growth by 200 to 100 BC. Okay, so yeah, so we're looking at Teotihuacan. Sorry, I had a slight misinterpretation there. The Mexico City used to be called Tenochtitlan, so that's an actual different one. So that's why I'm telling you, you have to be careful with knowledge that you actually have, that you know. So I thought we were looking at Tenochtitlan, which is Mexico City, but no, we're looking at Teotihuacan, which is the abandoned city with the pyramids. That is about that's about an hour north of Mexico City. Just that would be extra information, but again, don't get distracted by that information when you're on the day of the test. So again, I'm giving you this bad example of myself where I have information about this locality and I know stuff about that. So I have to be careful not to mix that and not get distracted by that. Okay, so the city of Teotihuacan, which lay about 50 kilometers northeast of modern-day Mexico City, began its growth 200, 100 BC. Okay, we're talking about something about 2,000 years ago. We know where it's located. Okay, now in the next paragraph, how did this tremendous development take place and why did it happen in the Teotihuacan Valley? Okay, so we're looking into questions about how did it develop and why. So we're looking at how and why. So I'm anticipating that this essay or this text is going to be explaining to me about the how and the why. Okay, then the next paragraph 3, this last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise. Okay, that's a difficult sentence. This last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise. What is that? What does that mean? Okay, circumstantially. So I would dissect some of this based on vocabulary. So, okay, circumstantially, okay, that's an adverb based on the adjective circumstance. So circumstance is things that happen. Implicated is maybe like linked or involved or related to. So this last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise. So something that was at the end of the paragraph 2 is related to why Teotihuacan developed. So that reference of this last factor, I might want to go back and look at the last sentence of paragraph 2. Unfortunately, the last sentence of paragraph 2 starts with the word the exact role. So that's going to be a very long sentence there. But okay, if I try to go all the way to the end of that sentence, I see such as the volcanic eruptions of the last first millennium BC. Okay, well, the last first millennium, what is the last first millennium? So I have to do some math, but the last first millennium BC, well, that's kind of like the last 1,000 years. Okay, and I can focus in here on volcanic eruptions. Okay, so there were volcanoes in this area and natural disasters. So I can see that when they were saying this last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise, maybe I can keep in mind here, there's volcanoes and natural disasters, and maybe that's related to why Teotihuacan developed. Okay, so that would be some interpretation there. That looks like some key information that I want to remember about the development of this essay. So I'm now at the end of paragraph 2, at the beginning of paragraph 3. I'm now going to skip to paragraph 4. It seems likely that Teotihuacan's natural resources, along with city elite's ability to recognize their potential, gave the city a competitive edge over its neighbors. Well, we already looked at this gray area, this gray text, a competitive edge over its neighbors. That's like it's not ambiguous, but it's like I don't know what that is initially. Maybe the competitive edge is referring to the natural resources, but I don't know which natural resources yet. I can anticipate that in paragraph 4, they're going to be telling me about these natural resources. And that's why this led to their development. Okay. Or the potential on there. Okay, so now moving on to paragraph 5. The long distance trade in obsidian probably gave the elite residents of Teotihuacan access to wide variety of exotic goods as well as a relatively prosperous life. Okay, I know obsidian. I know it's a technical vocabulary word, but I know obsidian is this black, almost kind of like a glass volcanic rock. It is derived from like a volcanic rock. So I can see here that there is a relationship between the volcanoes, the natural resources. They have access to this obsidian, okay, and that they traded it. So it says they had long distance trade. So they could trade with many different places outside of this area. Okay, and then lastly, paragraph 6, the picture of Teotihuacan that emerges is a classic picture of positive feedback among obsidian mining and working, trade, population growth, irrigation, and religious tourism. Okay, so I can see that there are many factors that played an important role in the growth of this city. It wasn't just natural disasters and they had access to this obsidian and they traded it. There's actually some other stuff here related to irrigation, so that's water, population growth, so there's more people, religious tourism, so that means people came to the region for some religious purpose. So they had people coming and going. They had trade. So that it looks like positive feedback. So they had lots of good things working correctly. Okay. So basically, I mean, I've been verbalizing all of this reading for your benefit, so you can see me kind of going through this logic. I would do this a lot faster in the time limit, but basically going through the first sentence of each paragraph, I get an idea that, okay, I know where Teotihuacan is located. We're looking at the growth from the area of 200 to 100 BC, so that's about 2,000 years ago. In the next paragraph, we're going to be talking about how and why did it develop. And then there's also a mention about these volcanic eruptions and then natural resources. So I can, and then in paragraph 5, they're talking about obsidian trade. And I know obsidian is a volcanic rock. And then in paragraph 6, they're talking about like the variety of these factors that contributed to the growth of the city. So now I'm not going to read the actual full text. I'm just going to take that information I have from those first sentences. And I'm now going to go start looking at the questions themselves. Okay, so the first question we have here is massive. That's a vocabulary word. Now, I don't want to get distracted by the answers first, but just to keep in mind, the word massive, I mean, I know that word, I'm an English speaker, but just thinking about this mass is something, well, something that has mass is probably big, and massive is an adjective for something that's big. So which one of these answers could be related to big or very big? So, well, ancient, no. No. Carefully planned, no. Carefully protected, no. So I can only cross off answers A, B, and D. And which one of these words is related closely to big? Well, it's answer C, very large. And I probably wouldn't want to waste time on this question because timing is very crucial on the read section. So I would try to take this time from a vocabulary question and try to allocate that time to a more difficult question. So if I can go faster through the vocabulary related questions, that means I can use that time for some of the more challenging questions here. Okay, now if I really was stuck on this question, hopefully not, but let's say I was stuck with massive and said, well, I'm hesitating between ancient and very large. So let's say I'm not convinced by carefully planned and I'm not convinced by carefully protected, so I could cross off answers B and C, no, sorry, B and D, and I'm left with a 50-50 choice between like A and C. Well, one of the things would be go look at the sentence itself in the paragraph, and you will have the split screen where the text is on your right hand side and the question is on your left hand side, so you don't have to scroll up and down like we're doing here. That's why next time I'm going to make sure that you see the way the text looks on the screen, and it'll be a little bit easier to do it. So if I look at this question and I say, okay, a number of massive religious edifices. So a number of massive religious edifices. So ancient, well, that doesn't seem to be so, I mean, we are talking about something from 2,000 years ago, but it doesn't really look like that this sentence is particularly about how old they are. So I would go back here and look at, does very large make sense? A number of very large religious edifices. So yeah, you have complexes, a great market, a large number. So it looks like things are big in this area. So I would go with a very large for the word massive. Okay, so that's just me kind of verbalizing this first question, which is vocabulary. Okay, next. In paragraph 1, each of the following is mentioned as a feature of the city Teotihuacan between AD 150 and 700, except. Okay, so these like negative factual questions where like all of this is there except this one, or be careful with those ones because usually what is going to happen is you get a long paragraph and you have to go through and kind of hunt for all of these detail here. Okay, so except. So I've got 4 options here. And I just was looking at that in paragraph 1 where I was looking at the word massive. And I do remember that they did talk about apartment complexes. So that was there. I remember that. They also talked about administrative centers. I do remember that. So I do remember that B and D were in the paragraph themselves. But I'm hesitating between A and C. I'm going to go back to that same sentence that had the word massive and see what else is in there. Okay, so okay, a large number of industrial workshops and a regular grid pattern of streets and buildings. So okay, a large number of industrial workshops and a regular grid pattern of streets and buildings. Okay, I'm going to go back to the question, look at the answers. So I have regularly arranged streets. Yes, and manufacturing workshops. So manufacturing workshops, I have to be careful with that because so industrial workshops, manufacturing workshops, I think let's see on here again. I think it's going to be the manufacturing workshops. And also I have to be very careful about the timing, because also look at here, we're looking at AD 150 to 700. So just because I saw this information in the paragraph, I need to make sure that it's a feature of the city at this time period. So I could easily be tricked into saying like, well, all of this information was in that paragraph, but I need to be very careful about the timing. So a key feature of this question is not just that this information is in that paragraph, it's also when did that information exist. So make sure you clearly understand what the question is asking you so you don't get tricked by this. Okay, so I'm going to go back into this paragraph one more time. and realized that, okay, so at its height, between about 80, 150, and 700, it probably had a population of more than 125 people and covered at least 20 square meters. Okay, it had over 2,000 apartment colonies, a great market, a large number of industrial workshops, an administrative center, a number of religious edifices, and regular go to streets. So yeah, it had the streets. It says industrial, not manufacturing. So I'm going to have to go with letter C and say that that was not a major feature of the city. So that one does feel a little tricky for me, between the difference between industrial and manufacturing, but it is a small detail that is on there. Okay, the next one here, pinpoint. Again, this is a vocabulary question. So pinpoint, without looking at the answers, I would first think, what do I think is pinpoint? Usually when I think of the word pinpoint, I put my finger on something so that I can indicate it. So for me, pinpoint is like indicating something. So which one of these answers is like indicate, like putting my finger on something? So I would say letter A, identify. I mean, but I have to make sure that I see it in its context. So this one I'm a little nervous about. If I just jump into this and say identify precisely for pinpoint, I need to look at seeing how pinpoint is being used in the paragraph, because there's a chance that it could have multiple meanings. So be very sensitive with words that have multiple meanings. So let me go back into the sentence and say the exact role of other factors is much more difficult to pinpoint. For instance, Teotihuacan's religious significance as a shrine, the historical situation in and around the Valley of Mexico for the end of the first millennium. Because the exact role of other factors is much more difficult to pinpoint. So we're looking at roles and factors. So I don't quite think this is like identifying them so specifically. I think this is a little bit more about, in this case, making an argument for. So I would say choice B for number 3 here. Wait, no. No, does that work? No, let me go back in here again. Look at that. Does that make sense for making an argument for? No, the exact role. No, exact. Exact is being precise. So no, I would go with my first instinct of saying identify and going with determining which factor here. So I would say, yeah, for number 3 here, I would say this is in this case, identify. And sorry, I have a small hesitation on question 2. Let me go back here for just 1 second. So it's saying several administrative centers spread across the city. Let me go back in there. This happens on the day of the test. You might think you have the answer, and then like a minute later, you go back and realize, like, huh, no, there's something I'm hesitating there. If you have a hesitation, make sure you write this down on your note paper and kind of give yourself some kind of a code that you have some kind of a way to say, okay, this answer is clearly this one, or this answer is definitely not this one. So if you can mark off which could be that you're ruling out, like with an X, like this one, no, this one, no. And you have some hesitation on this, and you want to give yourself like a moment to go like, I think I want to come back to this. You can. You do have the possibility to mark an answer as like not answered. And when you do the review button, you can go back and look at the answers that you did not, the questions that you did not answer. So you can use that technique if you have enough time at the end of the section. You can go back, and some of those questions that you hesitated on, you can use a review and make sure that you go back and check them. So right, in this one, I'm kind of hesitating going back, well, maybe was my definition between manufacturing and industry like a good distinction? I think they could be synonyms. So I'm regretting my choice C. And I'm actually starting to hesitate on choice B here about several and spread across the city. I'm going to go look in that section again and say that a large an administrative center. So that's one. It's not several. It's only one. So I got a little off there where I was mixing a large number of the workshops, but not a large number of centers. So I'm going to look at this answer again and say several administrative centers spread across the city. No, that's wrong. It was only one administrative center. So I got a little like mixing information from part of one answer and part of another. Be careful you don't do that. Be careful you keep these things clearly separated so you don't kind of mix and match on there. Okay, so I know now that this B is wrong because it was saying centers in plural, but there was only one. And it was not spread across the city. There was only one center. So that is clearly, there's two pieces of wrong information there. That's in the plural and that it's in different parts of the city. And in the case, there's many. So be careful. This is a trick answer that I did fall into at first. So, and it caused me to kind of hesitate on answer C. But in this answer, we've got two pieces of wrong information that help me verify that, no, this is wrong. This is wrong for two reasons, not just one hesitating reason. It's wrong for those two pieces of information. So for 2, I would put B. And for 3, I would go back to this and say, yeah, my first idea of like putting my finger on something, identifying it, determining it, that would be true for 3, for this vocabulary. And looking at the sentence, looking at the word in its context, it makes sense. We're looking at exact role and exact and precise, those are synonyms. And that's going to help me with this one. So we've looked at 2 vocabulary questions, number 1, number 3, and some of the techniques that you could use for looking at your vocabulary, looking at the vocabulary in context, realizing that vocabulary words could have multiple meanings. So you may need to look at the context to make sure that there might be some context clues that help you realize which meaning they're looking for this word. But also trust a little bit your instinct to know what is your interpretation of that word if you know it, and then try to find which one of these answers is closely related to the word that you are thinking about. Okay. Again, another vocabulary question. So ingenuity. Ingenuity is usually, if I understand, if I remember this kind of clearly, it's you're being kind of creative. You're using your imagination to kind of find a solution. So I'm going to look at the sentence just to kind of confirm that. So this is paragraph 2. And in here, the ingenuity and foresightedness of Teotihuacan's elite, and finally the impact of natural disasters. Okay, I need to go back a little bit into the sentence here. So Teotihuacan's religious significance as a shrine, the historical situation in and around the Valley of Mexico, the ingenuity and foresightedness of Teotihuacan's elite. There's nothing really popping out in that sentence that kind of confirms my meaning or how I might understand this, like creativity or using their imagination. But foresightedness is maybe thinking towards the future. I'm going to look at the answers here and go, well, ambition, no. Sincerity, no. Faith, no. Well, I mean, they talk about the religious, but I don't think so. I think this one, I'm being creative, using your imagination, I think that's related to the cleverness. So I would choose, on this case, letter D for that one. So as you can see here, we've had 3 vocabulary questions so far. Those are usually the more easier questions, but if you don't have a very strong vocabulary overall, you try to look at the context of the paragraph of the sentence, try to see if there's any details that can help confirm that. this sentence did not particularly help me. I would have to maybe whittle this down to say maybe sincerity and faith. I would probably think those ones are like a little awkward in this sentence, but maybe ambition about the elite, because usually elite people are ambitious, but that could be like an answer there that's trying to trick me. So if I had to choose between A and D, I might have to kind of flip a coin basically in my head and just kind of choose one of them. But on the day of the test, make sure you don't leave any blank questions. Make sure you answer all of them, because you're not going to be penalized for wrong guesses. There are tests out there, I think like the SAT, where if you make a wrong guess, they can take points away from you. But the TOEFL does not do that. So you don't get points taken away from you for trying to guess. So make sure you make sure you answer all of the questions in the reading section. So, okay, so we've gone through a couple of these vocabulary questions, and we've done an exception question. Number 5 is also another one of these exception questions. Of this information is not mentioned in there. So I'm going to go in here in paragraph 2 and try to look at these answers first and see what is not in there. Okay, so the presence of obsidian. Okay, so I do remember that they talked about obsidian, but I think it might have been in a different paragraph. Well, I'm going to have to go into paragraph 2 again. Okay, the potential for extensive irrigation. So irrigation is water, and extensive, so a lot of water. Okay, I have to look in that. A long period of volcanic inactivity. So inactivity means there weren't volcanoes erupting. I would think it might be this one first, because I remember skimming through the paragraphs going like, no, there was actually a lot of volcanoes and eruptions. So my first guess might be letter C. And then 2, Tiguan's location on a natural trade route. A natural trade route? That sounds a bit strange. Natural trade route, like what makes a natural trade route? Maybe a river, I guess. But I'm thinking it might be C, because I remember that there was actually a lot of activity. So I'm going to go back into this paragraph and try to look for something that would prove me that no, it actually was active. So let me go back into paragraph 2 and confirm this guess. So I have that kind of a hypothesis going into this question and this answer so far. So paragraph 2. Okay, so I didn't actually read this, but I did have to look at the question with the sentence with pinpoint and then looking at it with ingenuity. So I did get a little of some peripheral knowledge reading without actually reading the whole paragraph as a whole on there. So how did this tremendous development take place and why? Among the many factors, the geographic location, okay, on a natural trade route. Okay, so that means that answer D is included there. So D is not there. East of the Valley of Mexico. The obsidian resources. Okay, they mentioned obsidian. They mentioned the trade route. So now my choice is okay, the valley's potential for extensive irrigation. Okay, they mentioned extensive irrigation. So I got the 3 things that they do mention. So I'm thinking that they're gonna, it's letter C here with the volcanic inactivity. And I remember here the last line, volcanic eruptions. So that does show me that there were volcanoes erupting. There wasn't inactivity, meaning that there was no activity. So I'm going to say here this answer was C, like I thought. So that just confirms what I was thinking there. And then I'm going to move on again. I'm going to go back now to question 6. And so this is, question 6. So which of the following can be inferred from paragraphs 2 and 3 about the volcanic eruptions of the late 1st millennium BC? So when ETS talks about infer, it's a very strict sense of what they mean by infer. I have to link ideas that they didn't explicitly say, but it is information that is in the paragraph. I need to see how they are related. So I do remember that they talk about volcanic eruptions. I do have to go back and read paragraph 3. But I might go ahead and look at the answers here to keep in mind of what am I looking for. So they were more frequent than historians once thought. Okay, so there's more than they thought. B, they may have done more damage to Teotihuacan than the neighboring centers. So there's a question of damage. They may have played a major role in the rise. Okay, I think I did remember reading something here about C, about that was the first sentence of paragraph 3, if I remember correctly, and I did have to go back and read the end of paragraph 2 to find out that they were talking about volcanic eruptions. So that might be what I'm thinking about. This could be letter C, is my first guess. And then lastly, they increased the need for extensive irrigation. So I think it already said in paragraph 2 that there was already some potential for extensive irrigation. Not that there was an increased need, but that there already was there. So I think this is going to be letter C. I'm going to go take a brief look at paragraph 3 in there. So the last factor, this last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise. So that's the volcanic eruptions. Prior to 200 BC, a number of relatively small centers coexisted in and near the valley. Around this time, the largest of these centers, Cuicuilco, was seriously affected by a volcanic eruption, with much of its agriculture and land covered by lava. So that was another area. That was not Teotihuacan. Okay, with Cuicuilco eliminated as a potential rival, any one of a number of relatively modest towns might have emerged as a leading economic and political power in central Mexico. So there's some competition here as a potential rival, and any one of a number, okay? The archaeological evidence clearly indicates, though, that Teotihuacan was the center that did arise as a predominant force in the area by the 1st century AD. So, again, we're looking at volcanoes, and we're talking about lava. So this other rival was destroyed by the lava here. So that was a factor here. They don't talk about anything related to irrigation. They don't talk about anything with, what was the other answers here? Going into here, they were more frequent than historians would have thought. They didn't mention that at all. They may have done more damage to Teotihuacan than the neighboring centers. That's wrong. It was the other way around. It was Cuicuilco that was affected by this eruption, not Teotihuacan. They increased the need for extensive irrigation. They didn't talk about that. So I know this must be letter C. So I already had that first feeling that this was answer C. So I'm trusting my instincts and going into the paragraph and looking for that information to say that a lot of this information was wrong on there. Okay. And once again, we'll do another inference question here. So number 7, what can be inferred from paragraph 3 about Cuicuilco prior to 200? So it was a fairly small city. It was located outside the Valley of Mexico. It emerged rapidly as an economic and political center. Its economy relied heavily on agriculture. I just remember them talking about that was covered over in lava, and there was something related to agriculture. Let me go back and find that sentence. So I think the other answers are wrong, and I'm going to go look in here and say that Cuicuilco, with much of its agricultural land covered by lava. So I would say, and it was seriously affected by volcanic eruption because, well, you can't produce food and stuff if it's covered by lava. So all of that was destroyed. I wouldn't waste my time on these other potential answers. I would go straight and say I think this was related to the economy relied heavily on agriculture, and that seriously affected the city. I don't think any of this other information was in there. So it wasn't about the size, it wasn't where it was located, or economic or political power. It was eliminated because it was the agriculture, the fields were covered by lava. So I would say 7 is D. Now, number 8, again, it's just like a vocabulary question. So a lot of vocabulary questions in this set, in this reading. And the word predominant, so predominant, going into my own synonyms here, predominant is usually like a major feature or something, the main thing. So I would go with letter C, principal. If I have a hesitation on there, I would, because main and principal, those are synonyms with predominant. I would go back into the paragraph and find this predominant and see there. So the archaeological evidence clearly indicates, though, that Teotihuacan was the center that did arise as the predominant force in the area. So main force, principal force, yeah, that seems to make sense. There was no, there could have been one of a number of relatively modest towns, but it ended up being this one, just this one. So it was only one on there. So I would say this principle for number 8. Now getting to 9, which of the following allowed Teotihuacan to have a competitive edge over its neighbors? So this is kind of relating, as we mentioned at the beginning, when I saw this of competitive edge, that's a bit ambiguous. So what is that referring to specifically? So so this is kind of connecting the dots in here. So a well-exploited and readily available commodity. So commodity, that's something you trade. So it might be the obsidian. The presence of a highly stable elite class. Okay. Knowledge derived directly from the Olmecs about the art of toolmaking. Scarce natural resources in nearby areas, such as those located in what are now the Guatemalan and Mexican highlands. Okay. I think this could be A, like the obsidian. I think they talked about, I think they're referring to the obsidian, but I'm going to go look in this paragraph. I believe this would be in paragraph 4 here, where they have the competitive edge. So it seems like that Tijuana's natural resources, along with the city's elite ability to recognize their potential, gave the city a competitive edge. So the valley, like many other places in Mexican Guatemala, was rich in obsidian. Okay. The hard volcanic stone was a resource that had been in great demand for many years, at least since the rise of the Olmecs, and apparently had a secure market. More recent research on obsidian tools found at Olmec sites has shown that some of the obsidian obtained by the Olmecs originated near Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan obsidian must have been recognized as a valuable commodity. Okay, there's that key word, commodity, for many centuries before the Great Sweep or Rose. So I don't see anything here about like the Olmecs teaching them tool making or like scarcity. So going back into these answers, I would say that they didn't really necessarily talk about the presence of a highly stable elite. So no, it's not that. Knowledge derived from the Olmecs about toolmaking? No. Scarce natural resources? No, they were comparing Guatemala and the Mexican highlands and saying that Teotihuacan also had a lot of obsidian. So I would say this is letter A. It's well exploited, and they use that keyword commodity in reference to the obsidian. Okay, so we've gone through here. We've gone through a lot of these techniques for the vocabulary questions, some of these inference questions, some of these exception or not mentioned questions. Those ones are just kind of going in and finding the information, connecting the dots. We haven't gone into these questions 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, but as you can see, so question 14 is the summary question. This is where you have to find two of these sentences that like summarize, or 3 of these answers that summarize the text itself. Question number 13 is where do you place this sentence? In fact, artifacts, where would that go? Well, we'll look at these 2 next week. And this number 12 was also a kind of a what does this refer to? And then number 11 is choosing like 2 of these answers that are mentioned there. So we will look at those ones a little bit more next week. But as you can see here, these vocabulary questions and these kind of this was mentioned in the text or this wasn't mentioned in the text, those end up being a little more frequent. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, but I would encourage you to go back into these Let me see here. And there we go. Stop the screen share. Make sure. Yeah, you can see me now. So I would make sure go back into the into these PDFs that you have here. You have 4 examples on there. To go through those questions, go through them, look at the answers that are in the back there, and double check your work. But also try to work with the timer. Give yourself 20 minutes to go through these other reading passages that are on there. There are on there. This one was just one example in the PDF 1. There are 2 in PDF number 2. There's one about the dinosaurs and another one about the geological history of the Mediterranean. And in the 3rd PDF, there's one about agriculture. And in the 4th PDF, there are 2. One of them is about like water on Mars, and another one is about ancient Rome and ancient Greece. So you have like 5 more example reading passages that you could go through. Take a look at your answers and the scoring there, and to get an idea about how your answers for these 12 to 14 questions relate to your score over 30. There's a little bit of a percentage balance here. If you get like 95 to 100% correct of these answers, you would get a 30 out of 30. If you get about 86 to 95%, that would be like a 28 or a 29 out of 30. And 76 to 85%, that's like a 26, 27. And getting down to like 66% to about 75%, that would be like 22 to 25%, 22 to 25 out of 30 there. I'll put a link there that explains these relationship for estimating your score there. And these percentages would work for both the reading section and the listening scores, where if you do have the answer key and you look at how many answers you got correct, you can calculate, you can take your percentage of correct answers and then try to get an estimation of what that would be out of a score of 30. So, okay. So I hope you have found me going through these answers, me like verbalizing how I would answer these questions. I hope you have found this to be useful. Please feel free to leave me some comments and let me know what you find to be the most difficult questions for the reading section. So let me know that in a comment, and we will be back next week to go into some of these more difficult questions, like the summary questions, the insert the sentence question, and we'll look at another reading passage. But definitely this week, go through these example passages, practice with them. Make sure you use a timer, like 20 minutes on a phone or 20 minutes on a website, and try to go through it with that stress, the concentration of, I need to do this in 20 minutes. And also realize that the way we looked at it on the screen today, where like a 1-page thing, it's not going to look like that on the test. It's going to be split screen. I will make sure to show you what that looks like next time so you can get a better feel for that. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching today. Thank you for your feedback. I'm really sorry about the beginning of this with the microphone. I will make sure to test that next time before we start, so I don't waste your time. So I appreciate your patience figuring that out with the technical difficulty there. So this is live. There can be some issues with audio or video, so hopefully we can avoid that next week. But thank you very much for attending today. I hope you found this useful, and we'll go into more some of the more intermediate difficult questions next week. So have a great week. Definitely practice your reading as much as you can on a daily basis. The more you practice it, the better you'll get, and this will get easier. And definitely the harder academic style writing, not just easy to read newspapers or short stories, that's not going to necessarily be enough to get you with these higher reading scores. Okay, but practice as much as you can. There's lots of materials that are online. A lot of it is for free. So we'll see you next week. Have a great day, great evening, and great week. See you next time. Thank you.